Hey everyone, welcome to the USU podcast. This is Julie Riesler. I am your host and really excited to introduce you today to our guest. You're going to really love her and her message. So meet Ruth Soukup. She is a New York Times bestselling author dedicated to helping women overcome fear and create a life that they love. Through her blog, Living Well, Spending Less, which reaches more than 1 million women each month, she encourages her readers to follow their dreams and reach their goals. She's also the founder of the Living Well Planner and Elite Blog Academy, as well as the author of 5 best-selling books. Her practical advice has been featured in numerous publications and news programs, including Women's Day, Redbook, Family Circle, and Fox News. Her Do It Scared podcast launched on April 30th in 2018, and her next book, Do It Scared, Finding the Courage to Face Your Fears, Overcome Obstacles and Create a Life You Love, will be available very shortly, next month in May. Super excited to have you here, and I'll do a quick, if you're watching video, this is her book here. Ruth, I'm psyched to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's just jump in. I mean, I know there's a lot that you teach and that you stand for and do, especially around women and empowerment. I'm assuming it didn't always, start this way, having best-selling books. Like, maybe talk a little bit about your journey, how you've gotten to where you are, your USU, what that's been like.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, how much time do you have?
Yeah, I get it.
It's a long story. So I started my business in 2010. I'll start there. And that has been a whole journey in itself. I started not really intending to start a business. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom of 2 little girls, 1 and 3. And I was really just not sure what to do with myself. I had a lot of energy. I didn't have a great friend structure. We had just moved back to Florida, and I was feeling really lonely. And so I often would fill my time by going to Target, and like literally going to Target because I didn't know where else to go. And any mom of toddlers can relate to that, like needing to just get out of the house and strapping your kids into a shopping cart and walking around. But if anyone who has ever gone to Target knows you don't just go to Target and not put things in your cart. So it wasn't a great hobby, and it started to cause a lot of problems for me and my husband because he, at the time, was working as an aerospace engineer.
Oh, wow.
But hated his job, and he hated pretty much everything about it. And so every minute I spent at Target, he looked at that as another hour he had to spend at work. And we started fighting about money, and I knew I needed to find a new hobby. So I decided to start a blog and write about this adventure of trying to live well on a budget, which I called Living Well, Spending Less. And that opened up a whole new world to me, honestly, that I never even knew existed before. I had never really realized that there was this whole other world of blogs and bloggers and online business owners and people, entrepreneurs who were doing this from their home. And I got really excited, and I all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I could do this too. I could start a business. I could turn this into a business. And I went to my husband and I said, honey, I have an idea. I am going to make enough money blogging that you can quit your job. And he looked at me and he goes, honey, that is the stupidest thing that you have ever said. You can't make money on a blog. And famous last words, because I think if there's any way to get me to do something, it was to tell me that I couldn't do it. And so from then on, I was really determined to make it happen and figure out everything I needed to do. And it was like trial by fire, throwing spaghetti against the wall, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And so as I was doing that behind the scenes, at the same time, my blog was growing, and this message of living well and spending less and trying to figure that out, I started writing about how to run my home more efficiently. And it sort of just started resonating with a lot of people, and it sort of took off from there. So 2.5 years later, I actually achieved that big goal of having my husband quit his job, and he has been home ever since. And my business has just continued to grow to the point where it is now an online media company. And we have, lifestyle. I also teach people how to do what I did and create a successful online business through my online course called Elite Blog Academy. And then I provide a lot of help with productivity through my Living Well planner, and then also have a podcast that's all about motivation. So the podcast is called Do It Scared, which is the same title as my new book.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I love your story about feeling like, it started with Target. It started with that whole situation, which, and then taking it and writing about it and then seeing what could happen and then being told no, and that kind of being your fuel. I love that. Like the don't no, like that's going to make it be so that you are successful. I love it.
For some people that works, I think. For other people, that's super deflating. For me, I was like, challenge accepted. And he was never trying to be a jerk. And my husband was just a straight shooter, like he says, and which I appreciate so much about him. He was just like, I don't think that's possible. And so it was, I had really felt like I had nothing to lose.
That's so awesome. Talk a little bit, a lot of people that tune in, many are entrepreneurial, many would like to be, or in the beginning stages. And I know from having a business, it doesn't happen overnight. Typically 2 years is pretty quick, but talk about, you talk about motivation, about the steps you took, maybe some of what worked, what didn't work. Like what advice would you give to people that are like, I am thinking about taking my side hustle to something more?
Yeah, I love actually talking about this because first of all, the first thing I want to say about this is that I just gave you the 30-second, well, it was probably more like 3-minute overview of how in 2.5 years I went from being a stay-at-home mom of 2 kids to making enough money that my husband could quit his job.
Right.
That skips a lot of pieces. And what that mostly skips is how hard it was and how many things I tried that didn't work and how so many times I felt like giving up and how even though when I look back, it seems like it went really fast. At the time, it felt like it was taking forever. 2.5 years in hindsight does not seem like a long time. 2.5 years when you don't know if it's 2.5 years or 25 years, because you don't know what the end date is for that when you're in it, is really, really hard. And I coach and mentor entrepreneurs and business owners through Elite Blog Academy. We have 11,000 students. I see that all the time. Yeah. But that there's just this feeling of I'm doing something wrong because it doesn't seem like it's going as easy. I've heard Ruth's story or I've heard other people's success stories and it doesn't seem like it's that easy for me. Trust me when I tell you that anybody's success story is only the highlight reel. You're never hearing all the hard stuff. Anyone who's doing great work in the world is struggling, is making mistakes, is trying one thing and then running up against an obstacle and then trying another thing until they get there. Like you just keep going. That is the best advice that I can give you is just keep going, keep trying things, keep figuring it out, do more of what works, do less of what doesn't work, try something else, repeat. And that is how you get there.
Yeah. I love what you said. And I think so true. There's so much underneath that people have no idea of how hard it is or the struggles. And so for you, I mean, did you ever think you're going to have, you would have thousands of students in your
Oh my gosh, no. And like when I thought about making this a business, and I also want to say this too, the point at which my husband quit his job, I was not making what most people would have considered a full-time income. Like at the time we had paid off all of our debt. We were 100% debt free. We lived very frugally. I was writing about living well and spending less. I was really good at couponing. Yeah. Like we didn't need a ton of money. And we took a huge pay cut from what he was making to what I was going to support us on. I hadn't matched his salary at that point. Yeah. But we also knew that our quality of life was important. And it was important to us that one of us was focused on our kids and being 100% present for our kids. And so at that point, I was not 100% present and focused on our kids. I was like maybe 20% because building a business from scratch is hard. Yeah. And so that wasn't what we wanted. And we knew something had to give. But as soon as we took that leap of faith, like that was the point. It wasn't scary up until that point for me because he was my backup, right? I had my safety net, but when we took away that safety net, holy cow, that was when it got really scary and when it got real for me. And I realized, oh my gosh, I have to make this work. I don't even know if this is a real thing yet. Yeah. How can we be supporting our family on something that I created from scratch? I don't even think this is a real business. Like I was so filled with self-doubt. Yeah. That I went into massive hustle mode like I've never done before. And within, I think 2 months, I had tripled my revenue and then we've never looked back since. That's so awesome. It was kind of crazy, but getting to that first point was kind of like, okay, this is the minimum of what we can do. And then, and then to your other question, when I started, like, I didn't know what was possible. I had no idea. I thought my goal to make just enough money for my husband to quit his job was the biggest goal I could ever conceive of. It wasn't until I hit that goal that all of a sudden I saw, oh my gosh, there's all these other hills to climb. There's all these other possibilities. And I think so often we hear stories of people who are really successful and think, they must have had it all figured out all along the way, and they knew exactly what they were aiming for. And what I have realized is that is almost never ever the case.
No, that is such a good point, Ruth. I think to say that over and over again, like, it looks one way, it can seem like, oh, success is there. It's like people have no idea what went in I don't know, sacrifice is the word, but the jumping and leaping and hoping the net's there.
Oh yeah. So true.
Amazing. And, I know you talk a lot about doing it scared. Talk about what are some of the ways that you do your work, do it scared. How do you, what are some words of wisdom around that? I think most people, fear is a human emotion that gets in the way if you're not watching it. Yeah. Yeah.
So true. And, that's one of the things that is like, I've really come to realize I first got so interested in this topic just from talking to the people in my community who were telling me, I just feel stuck, or I feel like I'm sitting on the sidelines. I never seem to be able to jump in. I don't dare get started. Why is this holding me back so much? And it made me want to dig deeper. It made me want to find out more, like, what is this fear that's holding us back? Why do we feel so stuck? Why are we not able to move past it? What does it look like? And more importantly, what can we do about it? And so I started research for almost 2 years, surveyed more than 4,000 people in the course of the research for this book. But what we really discovered is that not all fear is created equal, right? There's the way that it manifests itself in our lives looks very different for different people. So some people, and we call these the 7 fear archetypes. So the procrastinator most fears making a mistake, and it's the fear of making a mistake that's holding them back, versus the outcast who most fears rejection and is maybe not afraid to make a mistake, but is so afraid of putting themselves out there because any perceived rejection just feels like completely devastating. And the reason that it's so significant is that once you start to identify that fear and how that fear is holding you back in your life and actually name it, it's sort of like going to the doctor and saying, I don't feel well. And the doctor has to give you a diagnosis before you can figure out how to cure it. And it's the same thing with fear. You have to diagnose yourself and start to see those patterns in your life, because so much of it happens subconsciously without knowing. And then all of a sudden you identify it and you're like, oh my gosh, now I see all these patterns. I see where it's holding me back. And that's when you can do something about it. So it's been fascinating just from my own standpoint too, to be able to start to see the fear in my own, the way it's played out in my own business also. And because I mean, honestly, I'm scared every day. There's not a day that goes by that there isn't something that is new and different or outside of my comfort zone or completely terrifying. Learning how to be on video for me was terrifying. I was the mom who I wouldn't even let my husband video me like with my kids or anything like that. I never wanted to be in front of the camera. And then I ended up starting a YouTube channel. I had never even dreamed I would be able to do something like that before. I was scared of speaking in front of people and ended up, doing that and having to overcome that fear. I mean, in my business, I'm constantly taking risks that I don't know if they're going to pan out. Every day there's something new and something scary. And every day I feel like I'm making it up as I go along. What I've also learned is that courage is like a muscle. So you do one little scary thing and that gives you the courage to do the next scary thing that's a little bit scarier and a little bit scarier after that. And before you know it, you're doing things that you never would have dreamed possible. And that's actually pretty cool.
It's great. I love how you explain that. So I'm curious, you mentioned these 7 archetypes and you started to get into that. You said the procrastinator, the outcast, what are the other, what are the full 7? Just so
the full 7.
Yeah.
So yes, there's the procrastinator who fears making a mistake. Then there is the rule follower who has an unhealthy fear of authority. So for the rule follower, they're so paranoid that they're going to get it wrong or step outside the lines or that they're going to get in trouble, that's usually what holds them back.
Okay.
There's the people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
The people pleaser's deepest fear is the fear of being judged or of letting people down. So for the people pleaser, they're constantly worried about, well, what are other people going to think if I do this? What are they going to say about me? What are they thinking? What if they're disappointed in me? And so to compare, say, the procrastinator who's afraid of making a mistake versus the people pleaser, where a procrastinator is just doesn't want to make the mistake and doesn't want to screw up. The people pleaser is more worried about what other people are going to think of them if they made a mistake or screwed up. So that's kind of the distinction there. Then there's the outcast, as I mentioned, who fears rejection. And so the outcast is actually one of the most ironic of the fear archetypes, because from the outside appearances, outcasts can appear to be almost fearless. Like they don't care what people think, and they're the ones who push everybody away, but really that's a form of self-protection. And then there's the self-doubter. The self-doubter at their core fears not being capable, and it has a lot of negative self-talk of just, you're not, who are you to think you could do something like this? What makes you think that you could even dream of doing that or being that? And so it's just this innate fear that they can't do it, that they're not enough, that holds them back. Then there is the excuse maker, also known as the blame shifter. For the excuse maker, it's all about the fear of being blamed or of being held accountable, is really what it comes down to. So there's never wanting to make a decision because you're afraid that somebody else is going to blame you for making the wrong decision, is often how that comes into play. And then the final one is the pessimist. And the pessimist is the fear of pain or the fear of adversity. And for the pessimist, it often comes from a place of having experienced a lot of pain or adversity, either extreme hardship, poverty, trauma, that kind of thing, that then keeps the pessimist stuck in this place of why even try, because there's no point. Like it's just going to end up bad again, or I'm just going to be hurt again.
Yeah. Great. No, these are great. And we'll have these all in the show notes. So Ruth, which one is yours? Like, which is your dominant? I'm like thinking for mine, and I'm just curious. I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Well, before I forget, I should say that we do have an assessment that you can take to actually determine your fear archetype. And it's at doitscared.com. So it's right there. You can link to it in your show notes. So you can take it for free and find out your top assessment, or we have a way of upgrading and getting like the full report, which is really fascinating. But I am the outcast, and I'm classic outcast. Yes. Which is actually fairly common for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So, because outcasts sort of have this desire to prove themselves, or to, because they fear this rejection. So it's this, I don't need you, I'm going to do it myself, pull myself up by my bootstraps kind of mentality. And so, yes, I have, it's funny because I have some great friends in an accountability group who have really, in the last year, since I've been doing all this work, of course, we've talked a lot about it within our group, and they call me out every time they see my outcast stuff coming up.
That's so great.
It's really funny, but it's really good. And it's true. I mean, talk about once you diagnose the problem, you can start to see those patterns. I have really learned that firsthand in the past year.
That's so interesting. I love that, the terminology. How did you have a background in psychology or in, doing social work or this kind of realm? Because I know this is like, I'm thinking of like Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness of, Project, and a lot of those assessments. I mean, I love this idea, and I'll definitely have all the info. Just curious, did you come from this background? Like, how did you dive into?
Well, I have had a lot of therapy, so we can dig into that. But I actually I did this survey sort of impromptu, thinking I just wanted to find out more from people. And it sort of exploded into this project that I had. I really was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it looks like. So I hired a whole team of researchers to help me go through the data and really dissect it and make sense of it all. And psychologists helped develop the assessment to make sure that we were, cross-referencing everything and asking questions in the positive and the negative, and not adding bias in there. So all of that part I had a lot of help with, I sort of had the vision for what I wanted it to be, and then found the right people to help me put it into place.
Well, and I think what you're also talking about here is the idea that, for those listening that are thinking, okay, I want to start something, but I'm not good at everything. You don't need to be. In fact, your
No.
zone of genius is not probably research and coming up with an assessment, but you had the idea and you got the support. So being able to do that
Yes.
allowed you to create that. And I think that's a great lesson.
Oh my goodness. I tell people all the time, if I can start a business about saving money, and when I am like the last person on earth who should talk to anybody about saving money, then you can literally start a business about anything and you do not have to be an expert. And I never claimed to be a money saving expert.
Right.
I really believe in walking beside your audience and saying, I'm trying to figure this out. Would you like to come with me on the journey?
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it that way, it's actually so much more relatable, especially for online business owners in this day and age. People don't want experts talking at them. They want people to talk to. They want to create a relationship. They want to know you and like you and trust you, because it's just like you're talking to a friend. You know that that friend might not have all the answers, but they will have the personal experience to kind of back it up.
Yeah. No, I think it's so well said. And it's, I would say, comforting those listening that are like, I don't have an expertise in that, or I'm just starting to get my head around this. Well, that's great. Bring people along with you. I think it's exactly it.
And
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you dive into whatever is interesting to you or wherever you're at right there, it can evolve with you. And that I think my students actually take a lot of hope from my own business and the way that it has evolved also, because as I mentioned, when I started, I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I was a stay-at-home mom. I wrote about couponing and saving money. And then I started writing a little bit about, some recipes that I was making. But my life now looks completely different. I run a 7-figure company with a team of 15 people. I have a headquarters building. It's a completely different story,
Yeah.
but it's still part of the journey. And honestly, I can tell you that I have so many people who used to watch those couponing videos on YouTube who are now my students in my blogging course, who listen to my podcast faithfully, who have been there every step of the way for the last 10 years and will continue to evolve with me, because as humans, we all evolve all the time. And so you will have people that follow you no matter how you grow and change too.
Yeah. That's so well said. No, and I think it gives that permission and ability to really shift, change. You don't have to be the expert. In fact, maybe it's a little more information about something, or a little more wisdom because you've gone to therapy a little bit more, or you've done this a little bit more in your life. I mean, yeah.
Often you're talking to people who were where you were 6 months ago or 2 years ago or whatever, or maybe might be where you were at last week.
Yeah.
You never actually know. I think a much better approach to take, if you don't feel like you're an expert, if you don't feel like you're qualified, is just to say, I'm not an expert, but this is what's working for me. And I'd love to share what's working and what's not working right now. And here's my heart. And when you can just come to people and be authentic and real, I think that's sometimes the most powerful message you can give.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So Ruth, for those that I think are not sure they haven't taken the assessment yet, but just some basic thoughts on fear, doing it scared. Is there anything you could say, no matter what your type is, these are some of the things that you've learned from just working through through fears and working. Yeah.
So there's a few general tips that I like to give. One is once you do identify your fear, it's really about changing some of the thought patterns that are happening. So I do recommend that anybody takes the assessment, or even in the book, you can read through and you can probably recognize some of your own patterns, or the patterns that you see in your friends. I've had a few people read the advanced version and be like, oh my gosh, I knew exactly who you were talking about with this one and this one. Like, I know that person and I know that person. I mean, and they're not, let me just clarify, they're not real people. They're composites of the research that we did.
Right.
But they're so vivid that people could just like picture in their mind who in their life fits that profile. So it's kind of easy to pick out your own behaviors there. But once you do start to see those patterns, then it's really essential to start working on replacing those thoughts that have up until now, those thoughts and behaviors that have been happening subconsciously and holding you back subconsciously, with new thoughts and behavior patterns that are going to be healthier and more growth oriented and more positive in your life, that are going to allow you the freedom to say, make mistakes, or to break the rules, or to do things that until that time you were holding you back and you didn't even know why. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I think the most important thing, some of the most important things that you can do are to take action, to just start taking very small steps in the right direction. And any step in the right direction is going to give you the courage to take the next step and the next step after that. And then I sort of alluded to this, but creating accountability in your life, there's nothing more powerful than having people in your life who will push you to be better and who will just encourage you when you need encouragement, but also call you out when you need to be called out. And I think that if you can dare to surround yourself with truth tellers, that is, it's life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great wisdom. This is what I believe in, what I teach, what I embody. I have an accountability partner I just talked to before we got on this podcast.
So good.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I like the general, just wisdom because, and for those that want to take the assessment, obviously, great. Talk about, the idea of your USU, what that looks like today, and maybe fast forward, what does that look like 5, 10, 15 years? What do you hope to kind of bring about in the world? What kind of legacy or what would you like to accomplish, produce, create?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. I guess I can't look forward without first giving a little bit more history from my past. But,
yeah.
I started my story at the beginning of this episode with talking about how I started my business, but my journey as a person and becoming who I am today, really, as an adult, started when I was in my early 20s. My senior year of college, I went through a terrible depression. I was married at the time. I was a senior in college. I was, had a full course load and just completely lost it. I started having flashbacks and memories of being sexually abused as a child. And it just really, really hit me hard, and my marriage wasn't going well. It all sort of was this perfect storm, and ended up attempting suicide and ended up hospitalized and had multiple suicide attempts, the worst of which I almost died. The fire department broke down my door. I was on life support in a coma, and the doctors told my family to say goodbye. I had less than a 10% chance of waking up.
Wow.
And they said, even if I did wake up, I would be brain damaged permanently. And obviously I survived. I'm not brain damaged, at least. Well, depends on the day you ask my husband, but I'm fine. And it was just a 2.5-year nightmare of basically hitting the most rock bottom a person could ever hit. I was, I did self-harm, I drugs, sex, alcohol, whatever. I mean, any kind of dangerous behavior. I was all over the place doing all sorts of crazy things. And at the end of it all, found myself divorced, bankrupt, completely alone. People had just given up on me, given up all hope. And then at that point had to figure out some way of getting my life back together. And when I say I've had a lot of therapy, I was not kidding. There has been some massive amounts of therapy.
Wow.
But I think when you hit that place where you think, I'm 24 years old and my life was over. I thought I had ruined myself forever. My arms and legs were all scarred up from all the cutting and self-harm. And I just didn't know what was even left for me. I had dropped out of college. And so at that point, I went to go live with my dad because nobody else would take me, and he didn't even want me, but he also couldn't turn me away, and laid in bed for several months, wouldn't get out of bed. And until finally he bribed me with the promise of a cell phone so that I could keep in touch with some of my other mental hospital friends. And because all the hospitals had kicked me out at that point. And he bribed me and said, I just want you to go to the gym 3 times a week. If you go to the gym 3 times a week, I'll get you a cell phone. And cell phones were a really big deal because this is 20 years ago. So cell phones were a big deal still at that time. And so that's what I did. And for a few months, I was only able to get out of bed long enough to go walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes. And then I'd go straight back to bed. And it was literally putting one foot in front of the other on that treadmill. That was the first thing where the clouds started to just lift a little tiny bit, just enough that I thought maybe it's not over. Maybe my life isn't over. Maybe there's something, maybe I can fix this.
Yeah.
And so do it scared at that point became my mantra, because it's terrifying to realize that you ruined your entire life and that there's nothing left for you, or to feel like there's nothing left for you.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So I finally, after a few months of that, called a new therapist. And I said, I have spent the last 2.5 years talking about every bad thing that's ever happened to me. It hasn't helped. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I just need to know now how to live and how to move forward. And so that's what she did. And that's what we would work on. And the simplest things that would seem so trite and stupid to most people, like, here's how to go to the grocery store and not have a panic attack. Here's how to, she helped me to get first a part-time job, and then that led to a full-time job, and then to work up the courage to finish my degree and to take a few classes so that I could finish my degree, and then to apply to law school. And I got a dog, and they're just like the simplest things. Got an apartment, moved out of my dad's house. But I got my life together, and one very, very, very small step at a time. And every time I took a step, I learned I was stronger than I thought I was, and I could take the next step. And I think that has helped me through my entire life. And so, then fast forward 10 years, I met my husband, I had a couple of kids, I started my business. And then that's when that whole story that I told you at the beginning began, of the story of my business. And yet all of the stuff that happened and prior to that was all a piece of me, and it's a piece of my heart. And it has, I think, given me the strength and the courage through my business, knowing anytime I fail that, it's not going to be the worst screw up I've ever done. I've already failed many times in my life, and I know that I can keep going, because every time I fail, I can fail forward. And so when you ask, what do I want in the next 10 to 15 years? Honestly, I don't know. I feel like the sky is the limit. My passion and my heart is to share this message with as many people as I possibly can, and to blow it up on a worldwide scale. And if I get to do that, amazing. But if not, where I'm at right now is the most amazing thing I could have ever imagined also. So I'm just, every day is gratitude, which probably sounds a little cheesy, but it really is true based on where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thanks, Ruth, for sharing so vulnerably. And I mean, this is the thing. People have no idea, right? They hear, okay, you have a successful business, you have this, and this is going on. And what I love about your story is that not that I love that, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And it sounds like that laid the foundation for you. Learning how to literally take one step at a time, doing it scared, has helped you to really to hold on to that as you've started your business.
Yes. And I didn't know at the time either that was laying the foundation for where I would eventually be. I mean, I could have never have dreamed 20 years ago when I was laying in that hospital bed, that any of this would ever be possible. I remember actually, at one point with one of my therapists said, I want you to make a 10-year list of what do you want your life to be like in 10 years. And I laughed at her and said, I'll be dead in a year. I'll be dead in 6 months. I'm not going to make a list of what's going to happen in 10 years. And she pushed me and said, come on, just try it. And so I wrote things like, in 10 years, I'd like to have long hair. In 10 years, I'd like to grow a garden. I mean, things at that time that seemed so mundane actually seemed impossible, because I had shaved my head at some point during my depression. And they were things that literally seemed like they would never happen for me. I want to be married to the love of my life. And, things that now I take for granted because they have happened. And so many other things that I could have never dreamed possible. But I think sometimes that's where now I have the benefit of hindsight. where I
Yeah.
get to look back and say, if I survive that, I can literally survive anything. And I tell people that all the time too. Like if you feel like you have screwed up your life so badly that there's no recovery, I promise you that there is. There is no mistake that you have made that is so big that you can't fix it, that you can't turn it around, that you can't turn your life around and create something amazing from that. It is not too late. Well, no matter where you are, no matter what you're starting from, it's never too late. You just have to take that first step and then the next step after that and just keep going, and you will get somewhere amazing.
Beautiful. My last follow-up question to that is, as I'm listening to you, is just, I would imagine it's hard not to have some spiritual connection feeling of kind of, you said gratitude, you can call it all different kinds of words, but has it enhanced your own connection to, call it God, the higher self, divine, oneness, something? Has it, whatever you call it, if anything, like, is it shifted your own spiritual connection? I'm curious.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I grew up as a Christian, very religious family, went to Christian schools all my life, went to Christian college. And so when all of this depression happened in my early 20s, I was taking theology classes. I was taking philosophy classes all at the same time. And that's when I said it was a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm. Like theology, religion, and depression, or theology, philosophy, and depression are not a good combination.
Yeah.
And so I, in all of my 22-year-old wisdom or 20-year-old wisdom, decided that God didn't exist and life had no meaning. And in the absence of God, which had been the center of my life up until that point, that there was no reason to go on living. And it was sort of, I didn't want to feel the feelings that I was feeling. And so I completely went to this like totally rational, or what I thought was a rational place of, I'm just going to kill myself. This is the logical decision. And so I recovered from the depression, but I did not recover from that spiritual, just like God that loves me would not let this stuff happen to me. And that actually took me many, many years to get back to a place of faith. And then there was finally a point, and it was actually after I started my business, that my husband and I started through a few strange circumstances that I won't get into. We did start going back to church, but it was sort of reluctantly, where I was like, I'll go because I think it's good for my kids, but I don't really want, like, this is not my thing. And God was really, I believe, chipping away at my heart and saying, I saved you for a reason. I saved you all those years ago. I brought you here for this. Like this platform that you now have is here to tell your story, to bring hope to people that may not have the hope. Because the thing that I remember so vividly about being in the hospital, and I used to say I was a bad mental patient. I mean, obviously I was not happy. No one's happy, but I was not cooperative either. And they would say, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. And I would look at the doctors and everyone who was trying to help me and say, don't tell me that. You can't tell me I'm going to get better, because no one gets better. This place is a revolving door, and everybody who leaves comes back again. And that's what would happen. Everybody kept coming back. Nobody would ever get better. And now I get to be the person who people look at and say, she did it. She got better. And I actually have a lot of therapists and psychologists who write me now and say that. Like, they use my story because it's out there on my blog and I've shared it in many different ways. They say, this is your example of somebody who battled depression and was able to beat it and to defeat it. And there is hope for you. Yeah. And so that's what I love to tell people now too, is let me hold the hope for you. If you can't hold it right now, if you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, like, I will hold it for you, and just have that much trust, like this much, that it is there, even if you can't see it right now. And I know, because I've walked that road too. And so, yes, I do believe, whatever you want to call it, a higher purpose, God, that is why I'm here today, because for all intents and purposes, should not be here. Wow. And I also believe that one of the reasons I have this business that I do, out of, not really knowing what I was doing at all, is because it's the opportunity to tell my story.
Yeah. Wow. Lady, you are a warrior of for hope and
Oh, thank
light.
you.
Yeah, no, it's been really a pleasure. Just thank you for, I'm just, as I'm sitting here thinking, my gosh, how grateful I am to speak to you and just to hear your story as another human being on the path, like thankful that you're here and you made it through. And this is exactly the point when we go through tough things, mine looks different, right? But I can
Mhm.
tell you if you're struggling with like food addiction or people pleasing or anything in that realm, like I got it. And for you, I mean, there's so many people that have lost that flicker of hope. And then there's probably a whole range. And so I'm so grateful to get to know you and share you and for what you're doing. I mean, this is adding a massive value. And I'm so grateful to hear like just what's possible, right? Like as you said, it's one little step at a time, the next foot
Yes,
forward. So, wow.
so true.
Thank you
Well, thank
so
you.
much.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share this story and getting that message out there, because I think that the more people we can share it with, the better off we'll all be as humans. I think there's something so powerful about hearing other people's stories, even if their
Yeah.
stories aren't exactly your story, because it's what connects us as humans. And it's really important to me to be able to have that opportunity. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.